what the U.S. debt crisis, the Libya and Afghanistan Wars, and the Patriot Act portend for our future is the subject. These issues are analyzed. So first, what does the debt crisis have to do with all of these other factors? Well, if you look at my previous videos that I've done, which have PowerPoint presentations in them and my website, I've broken down most of the U.S. economy. The U.S. economy is about $14.2 trillion in GDP. About $5.5 billion of that is for payroll jobs, is payroll. What we really would like to do next is break out the non-government payroll. If government's 40% of our expenditure, we can assume there's about $3 billion in non-government payroll, which means in a sense there's $3 trillion rather. There's about $3 trillion worth of labor that is sustaining all of the rest of the 14.2 trillion of the economy. So it's all rather complicated, but this is basic facts. So we have about $3 billion that we earn in payroll from the U.S. economy, yet we spend $2.2 trillion on criminal justice, corrections, police, CIA, Homeland Security, and the Pentagon and their associated activities, basically military, police, as Eisenhower called it, military-industrial complex. These are facts. Another huge part of our economy is there's $2.8 trillion in medicine, which is extremely inefficient and is bloated by insurance. And if you don't mind my making an aside, I highly recommend that people organize in their cities, maybe through a community bank, to provide their own insurance system so that they don't have their funds extracted. Even the nonprofit Kaiser is a huge amount of inefficiency compared to optimal models of medical delivery. So our debt is largely driven by our military adventures in Iraq. And some estimate, you can ask Michael Scherer, for example, how much it cost to kill bin Laden. It cost about $5 trillion. So it would be almost 2 years' wages for everyone in the U.S. not employed by the government, if we presume that was the group supporting us. So we go on to the Libya and Afghanistan wars and what they have to do with it, what it all portends. So the huge problem with the Libya war in particular, now that I've actually read the UN Resolution 1973, so in reading that resolution, I had to find out who is this panel of experts of 8. Very difficult to find these people in the news. And then but what I did find about the United Nations was very disturbing. If you think the American government is bad, the United Nations is not very rosy either. So why do I mention that? Well, here's the problem. The problem is that no small country that doesn't want to be subjected to international globalized corporations will be able any longer to have any confidence in the United Nations. Now, why would one make a radical statement like that? The UN Resolution 1973 doesn't say anything about removal of Gaddafi. It says to cease, have a ceasefire. And as I mentioned before, the government has agreed to a ceasefire followed by elections. The rebels have refused to talk to them as long as Gaddafi stays in power. And this is not a problem on the Gaddafi side. And again, I don't have any preference over who rules Libya. I'm just interested in fixing American policy so that we are no longer screwing ourselves. So this problem is now that the United Nations has lost credibility. And if you go through the way we've implemented this, okay, and the way Ban Ki-moon has handled it and appointed this panel of 8 experts, and I studied this. This panel is slow moving. It doesn't correspond to what's going on. It doesn't authorize these funds to be dispersed to buy arms for the rebels. And if you're a country that's agreed to enforce 1973, you can't act unilaterally on unfreezing funds like Britain is doing. You just can't do that. Now, okay, do it. You can, so do it. You don't have to care because you can do it. But what does it mean for you later on? It means that no one will trust you as a small neutral. They will fear you. Apparently, that's what we want. We want all the small countries to fear us. Now, not me and not you, but this military industrial complex. This has grown so much. It's now more than 4 times what we spend on education. I read an article by a very fine man who wrote an article saying, shame on us for pulverizing the pulverization of Libya. He was a former ambassador, and he trained the Libyan Royal Army before the coup that brought Gaddafi into power. And and what we have here is that the UN itself appears to be corrupt because the appointee to the United Nations to be the head of its peacekeeping mission, its envoy to Libya, has actually been leading the Transitional National Council in removing Gaddafi from power, which is not supported by the resolution. And where is United Nations leadership? They're the ones who are supposed to oversee the freeze. So this freeze of assets of Gaddafi, it wasn't just we picked doing it. It was a United Nations resolution that we have agreed to enforce and abide by. And in that resolution, it also restricts everyone else, not just the loyalists. So what has this all got to do with us in the Patriot Act? So what we see here in the U.S., we have 1/4 of all prisoners in the world. Our incarceration rate is 4 times higher than other countries. We have 10 million people who've been convicted of felonies, which is not what the founders intended, to have one in, if you look in terms of just men of voting age, beyond 18, you've probably not got more than 130 million of them in the country, so it would be 1 in 13 adult males. Well, then there are female felons as well. At any rate, it's 1 in 30 for every man, woman, and child. So the systems that we build, the correctional system, a criminal justice system where we've created the poverty, creates property crime and drug abuse, and then we jail people for those things, swelling our jails. Then we disenfranchise them, so it's more difficult for them to find work. I've seen programs from the government to help small businesses and so forth, and they usually disqualify felons. Now, felonies can be as innocent as a non-sufficient funds check. So denying people the rights to certain licenses and so forth that aren't related to their crimes means that we are abusing the concept of a felony. Now, what does that mean to you? It means that this correctional system is hungry. This police system is growing. It's growing very fast. And I've provided documentation about this, and you can find it online if you go to Wikipedia and go to each of these subjects and take a look at graphs. And then there's this constant sucking of our money upwards into the top 1%, the top 5%, and an impoverishment of the rest of the country. Education is less than 1/4 of all of this. So what does it all mean? It means at the end of the day, our education system's weakened. We've deindustrialized the country so that we've created basically a cowed population through the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act is also incredibly expensive, all of the security apparatus. And then we continually attack countries, obviously with great controversy, with the benefits of the attack being much smaller than the downside if you really are concerned about terrorism. Bombing Libya, even if you love it, obviously is going to take a certain number of people in the world and radicalize them. And we need to shrink this military-industrial complex, which is strangling us. So what's going to happen? These small countries are going to remember how we took a resolution that was intended for peacekeeping and used it to depose a government that didn't allow U.S. oil companies in it, except under their terms. Although they got scared after the invasion of Iraq and they gave up their WMDs and they allowed unemployment in their country just to make the West happy. When people say that there's high unemployment in Libya, every Libyan has still gets effectively a salary whether he's employed or not. He doesn't like it. He wants to have a meaningful existence. But actually, they didn't have this until they opened to the West, and the West wants unemployment. They want an elastic labor market. I don't know the details of why, but it must have to do with liberalization, whatever that means. So what's going to happen is that Brazil, Russia, India, and China, who are all not invading anybody, building strong economies and growing rapidly. And in China's case, they're leasing all the natural resources in Africa, which is part of the reason we tried this thing in Libya. They wouldn't join our new African command system. They're one of very few countries in Africa, maybe just them and Zimbabwe. So what it means is that those countries are going to rise up. They're going to know about our cynical manipulation of things because we can now. But watch what happens to your kids. So, write your congressman and support the demilitarization of the United States so we have normal defense and we're not manufacturing wars by bombing Arab countries and then and so I talked about the correctional system. It wants to be used. Police want to be used. Security systems want to be used. They want to justify their existence. They want bigger salaries. They want more computers, just like everybody else in private industry. And the military system is so large and so powerful and so constantly sharpened that, of course, it wants to be used. The idea that Gates was being beneficent about $700 billion, when if you look at us against an average country, we could cut that down to $100 billion. We could cut this 2.2 trillion down to 300 billion and still do quite well. That would free up enough money. We could quadruple education resources in the US. And if you did that alone, you could reindustrialize your country, have a new generation of scientists and engineers, and all the things we need to restore our glory and our independence as free people who are not cowed, who aren't selling out their rights, and who aren't going around killing people without even knowing they're doing it. You go out on the street and ask people about Libya, they don't know about it. You can go to Current TV, Al Gore's system. I searched for Libya. I didn't see a single show on it. It's like people are blacking it out, or they don't care. How can you not care that we started another war based on a lie and infuriating Muslims? Thank you.